let's talk about the games that actually happened. The conference championship weekend. We had Oregon beating Penn State, SMU fighting to come back and losing in that ACC game. What was kind of what do you want to talk about first? Which game? We also had Georgia and Texas.
Let's go ahead and start with the Big Ten. And so I think that we did not put enough respect on Oregon throughout this entire season. I know that they really they did not have a strong schedule, but they have been the top to bottom most dominant team this entire year. And I know that they are not we don't perceive them as lengths above every other team. I think that this Big Ten championship game did just kind of solidify it for me. They are a legit contender, and I would be surprised if they don't win the national championship this year.
Yeah, and Penn State brought it this week. Their offense looked great. Their defense, obviously giving up points to Oregon, but they kind of tightened up at the end there. And Oregon is the most complete team right now going into the playoff. They have, other than Ohio State, like the best talent on the roster. And this win, I think there was a certain point in the game where they could have just packed it in and like, you know what? We're not going to put it on the line for this shit. Like, let's just go into the playoff and we'll go from there. And I think it showed a lot that they had that resilience to stay in it and, win this game for a Penn State team this was like their life on the line. Like Penn State went all out to win this game.
Yeah, and I think again, it does suck that the two highlights from Penn State's season are realistically both losses. That's when they've showcased them being the better football teams. But realistically, they showed that they are gonna. I mean, even with the way the bracket fell, they're gonna go far in this playoff. They have a pretty easy trip to the semifinals. But I think they showed that they are a sizable team, and James Franklin is going to be the thing that is going to be the story. Obviously, throughout this playoffs, he can't win a big game. All this yada yada yada. But I mean, every time they go into a big game, they're always the underdog, and it's hard to win at this level being the underdog.
Yeah, and I think they should be happy though where they're at because after that performance and what they did against Ohio State early on, they can have the confidence to go in and be like, look, we've seen these guys now. We know that we can run with them. We can sneak out a win here. And maybe not even sneak out a win. Like if we execute better, we can win these games pretty definitively. And they're a team that we've said for a few weeks now, they could win the national championship. They have the pieces. If their offense can keep up, which if their offense is putting up 37 points, they can definitely win a national championship in this playoff.
Yeah, I think the two biggest differences for me are going to be coaching. It's James Franklin versus Dan Lanning. I give Dan Lanning that edge. I feel like Dan Lanning is not going to back down from a big spot where we've seen James Franklin time after 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 time.
The coach of the Kings.
Yeah, Mike Brown. But we've seen him just kind of collapse when he is under pressure. So that's going to be a big concern moving forward. And that's something that was showcased in this game. And I think Dillon Gabriel is a huge plus for this Oregon team. I feel like in another year, he would have got more Heisman buzz, but they didn't really have big games. He didn't really have a marquee moment. And so he kind of flies under the radar, but Dillon Gabriel has been really good this season and he's performed what needed to perform. I feel really comfortable with him in the ball in a late game situation.
Yeah, and in these next coming weeks, we are going to talk about the bracket and get into details on that and how we feel about these matchups and Dillon Gabriel and the Ducks' chances. But I want to get through the rest of these conference games because let's just go to Georgia and Texas. This game was a rock fight. It was tough sledding all around. And I want to say something that maybe a little controversial because I was watching this game thinking, man, Texas, if they're not finding their way in the end zone, but they're kind of controlling this game right now. To me, watching that game early, if Carson Beck doesn't go down, Texas wins that game.
100%.
If Carson Beck plays that full game, the offense was doing nothing. They were struggling. He was not seeing the field, the pressures in his face. they'd lose that game. I think Gunnar Stockton came in, gave him a fresh breath of air. He looked really good other than that dumb interception he threw. He had the poise, he ran, he threw a touchdown. Like everything changed once he came into the game.
I'll do you even one better. Like, I think realistically, it would have been a better game if both backups played. I mean, I think Arch Manning and Gunnar Stockton, I think they would have been a better matchup. I don't know what's going on with Quinn Ewers. Something with it, like they're moving the ball up and down the field. I think they had like 250 yards of offense to like Georgia's 50 at half. And so they were just like all over the field, but they just couldn't score. And it just looks weird with Quinn Ewers. I'm not sure what is going on because he's just making dumb reads. He's not finishing drives. It just feels clunky. And it feels like when he has a couple of plays and gets the momentum rolling, he does something that shits down his leg. And it's like, oh, okay, well, now we're back to square one. Thanks, Quinn.
Yeah, well, at the end of the game there too, it's like they had a chance, they had to punt it back, and then they get the ball back, and it's like this is the drive where they can go win it. And I said before that drive, I would love to see Arch right now to give that mobility. And then what did they do? And then sack. Like it just all went to shit for Quinn Ewers. I think he threw the interception there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end. So of the end of regulation. So I was like, I would have loved to see Arch in that situation so he could get out of the pocket, kind of keep things alive in a 2-minute drill. And I get Quinn Ewers is your starter this year. You have to stay with him, but do you really? If the situation's called for, he's getting pressure in his face all day. He can't run as well as Arch. Would it have been smarter to just say, well, situationally, we're gonna go with this guy? They did put him in there for a while.
I've seen someone say that they were using him the way Michigan uses Alex Orji, just strictly as a runner. And it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense because every time you march out Arch, they know it's going to be a run play.
But that should tell you how limited Quinn Ewers is as a runner, as an athletic quarterback, to where you're like, well, we have to switch up our run game by putting Arch out there, because also the run game was getting stuffed in the second half, and they continued to go at it up the middle, and it just wasn't working. And it felt like to me, you're wasting plays. There's not a lot of time, and you're wasting plays trying to run up the middle and get 1 or 2 yards. Like, either let's rip it down the field and like see if we get flags or see if we get something deep, which kind of was working for a while, or put Arch in there so we can get out of the pocket and like create some space for this run game.
Yeah, and I think that this was a game that ultimately you're going to look back during draft season. You're going to be like, I'm out on both these guys. Like, and these are two quarterbacks that are very highly touted coming in. It was going to be, in my mind, it was like, okay, well, Carson Beck has the most hype, but I really believe in Quinn Ewers. He's been he's been in college football for a long time. He's played high level football. We know that he's accurate, and that accuracy, like everything about both guys has just kind of gone out the window. And it's so weird to see it because it's been the entire year real hit and miss.
Yeah, I think to me though, I actually liked at the very end of the game, Carson Beck coming in with one arm, handing the ball off to win the SEC championship. I was like, dude, he's going to be a Georgia legend now. Like that play will be his legacy, and like happy for him in that situation. If he's not going to go on and be a great NFL quarterback, at least he's going to have this like college moment that will be like, oh, we're going to play highlights of that moment looking back at us beating Texas. So good for Carson Beck on that end.
Yeah, but also it's like, all right, well, we've just seen this guy with a dead arm come in there. Like, are we going to have a starting quarterback for the start of the playoffs? Like, what's the level of recovery that we're going to be able to get before we have our first game?
No, he's out. He hurt his PCL.
He's done?
I'm pretty sure he's out.
Because they still have the first round bye. It's going to be a few weeks now. Is it done? Because that going into a playoff game on a neutral site with Gunnar Stockton and this like last week at the SEC championship being his first meaningful snaps, you got to be concerned. That has to be a concern.
his UCL. I believe that's the same thing Brock Purdy had hurt, but Brock Purdy tore it, or almost tore it. Without seeing the MRI itself, it's impossible to know the severity of the injury. Uh, yeah, and there's no timeline yet. I don't think they're gonna reveal it.
Yeah, usually they
It's
keep
not.
these
It's
things
looking
under
like
wraps.
it's not. A partial tear could be 6 to 12 weeks before the ligaments healed.
So do we know if it's a tear or if it's a strain?
Doesn't say.
Because I just think they hold these things close to the vest. I think we're not going to know until day of. And realistically, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do? Because yeah, Gunnar Stockton came in and provided us a jolt, but ultimately this is a young guy that doesn't have a lot of meaningful snaps, and we're putting him in the highest pressure game of the season.
Yeah, but would you rather have him who came in and looked pretty good in the second half, or Carson Beck who's looked bad when he's healthy at times, and now you're gonna send him in there with one arm or like a dinged up arm? I think I'd just rather go with Gunnar Stockton and like defense run the ball and see if he settles in and can make some throws.
Study up, bitch.
We want to talk about the ACC championship, Clemson and SMU. It looked ugly there for a while for SMU, and then they started to fight back. So clearly, that probably saved the playoff life there for a second, and then you like look back at the bracket and you're like,
Did it?
what's going on? You know. But
yeah.
about the game itself, what did you think?
Okay, honest, like if I'm going to be completely honest, no, I thought neither of those teams should be in the playoffs. Like, just like with the historical of watching Clemson and knowing that they were in a shootout with Louisville, who's nowhere near a playoff team, and they could not compete. They could not keep up with Louisville. No, looking at that game, I'm like, all right, both of these teams are cooked. Like, there's no way they make it out of the first round. As a game in itself, I'm like, this is a fun game. This is what you want to see. Like, I think both sides really battled. It came down to the last second kick, and it was like, damn, like this is what a fun game. Like in a vacuum, very fun game. As a whole, looking at the whole picture, you're like, fuck, like how we gotta change this system, dude. This is bullshit.
Do you think watching these two teams in it, I kind of wonder like what would Miami have done? Like, would Miami have, like we were saying, Miami in this game against SMU or Clemson were getting run out the gym. I think they're the third out of those three. They're the third best. So it would have been interesting to see Miami in there though, especially with the way SMU looked early on. I mean, Miami could have poured it on them because they do have a good offense. They don't have good defense, but I actually seen someone. They were like, I had to get my revenge. You know when like your team loses and then you go on Madden and like run up the score against them. They did that in college football and they gave up 47 points. And they're like, damn, even on rookie mode in college football, like
Miami's defense cooked.
Even on freshman mode, Miami's defense getting cooked.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the story with Miami this entire season. I think it would have been fun to see them in the ACC championship because, again, like their best team was a Florida team that didn't do anything. Like, you know what I mean? That wasn't good at the beginning of the season. So that was probably their best win. I don't know, man. It was, again, fun game. I think, did you see the conspiracy theories that Dabo let them come back and because he wanted both like teams to get in? I think that's bullshit, but I also think like there are specific like nuances to this game where all right, well, if they make it close, we're probably both going to get in. And I think we've seen that on display previously in this season with Indiana, Ohio State. Indiana knowing all I need to do is not get blown out. And they still got blown out, but realistically, they did things to burn clock on the drive at the end where they scored. And that's some bullshit. Like, I think you have to, as a as a conference look at the different scenarios. And I know like ultimately you want to put it on display, you want to kill them, but also it's better for you as a whole if the conference looks better. And so I think that does kind of come into play where it's like, okay, yeah, like I think something that it reminds me of is like in basketball where they're like, yeah, fuck it. Like we're gonna take out our starters, we're gonna relax a little bit. They come back and it's like, oh, okay, well, now let me step on the gas. They did it to like I think for an extent where it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna take our foot off the gas. SMU comes back, and I think before they could realize like, oh shit, it's out of hand. It got out of hand. They came all the way back, and they're like, oh, what do we do now? All right, cool, and they win somehow. And I think they almost let it get away from them. I think
Yeah,
that
'cause
was
I
kind of the
think
case.
even in the nuance of that, I think there is a nuance to the losing team of like, yeah, we're letting you kind of stay around, but like chill, you know?
Yeah, hey,
Like,
we're
yo,
fucking doing you a favor.
yeah, like we could have beat you by 50, but now
Yeah.
you're over here acting like, hey, maybe I can win this shit. It's like, if we're gonna
Did
let you stick around for the like to get in the playoff, don't try to win this shit, you know?
Did you see that tweet beforehand that was like, I already know what's going to happen. Clemson's going to go up big. They're going to, SMU's going to come back. Dabo Sweeney's going to be like, oh, I know that's a good football team right there. They should be in the playoff. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, the ACC was an exciting, good conference this year, but like
No, it wasn't.
not
It was ass.
in at the top. I liked SMU and I actually did like watching Clemson, but for the most part, they're not a good conference.
That conference sucked. Like, what are you talking about? Every team sucks
Boston College was exciting.
for like 2 weeks and then they sucked. Like, what are we talking about? The ACC was fucking garbage every week. It was so tough to watch. You did not. I'm going to tell you right now. You did not like watching Clemson. Like it was not a fun ride. Like none of these teams were fun.
So that's what I'm saying is like they don't deserve 2 playoff spots.
No, they don't.
Let alone we were talking about that maybe not even getting one. Like,
We were talking about the
does the
Big 12
champion deserve? Well, they kind of
before.
are hand in hand. Both of them are like the middle tier of the conferences where like some of these teams could sneak through, some of them are gonna fall off, and you're like, do they really deserve a spot over like some of these schools, even if they do win it all?
Okay, yeah, let's cut the shit here. Should have SMU have gotten in the playoff? I know they had a great performance, but it really came down between them and Alabama. Do you think the spot should have been to SMU?
If I'm going by what I stated earlier in the season, where if you win your games, you're there, you deserve to be in. I would say yes, they made it to a championship game. If you're going off of like who has a legit chance to win some games in there, then Bama should be in. But Bama also lost to Oklahoma. The second that Bama lost to Oklahoma that bad, I was like, you can't put them in. You cannot put them in over a team in a championship game. I get it, but the complaint of all the people saying, "Oh, well, we're just not going to schedule good opponents now. We're just going to take it easy." Like Bama lost to 2 500 teams. And then someone was like, "Well, if SMU was in the SEC, they would be 500." And it's like, "Well, if they're a 500 team, they probably would have beat Bama because they lose to 500 teams." So, I don't know. I think Bama definitely would have a better chance in the playoffs than SMU, but the games have been played. The records are what they are. One team went to a championship game. What can you do?
Yeah, I think honestly, again, I think it was the right. I don't want to say. Hold on. I think it was the fair move to make, and I think ultimately they got cyberbullied into doing it because they seen the reaction. Oh, you can't take away this from an SMU team. They deserve it. Like, and realistically, you have to set the precedent that you should not be punished as in it being an extra data point losing in the conference championship game unless it's a blowout. If they would have got blown out like the way it was trending, I think automatically they get moved out, Bama moves up, and everyone's like, yep, I think that's fair. But they won the game, and that was what you set the entire year. You kissed Miami's ass the whole time and ranked them super high just because they were racking up wins. You've kissed Indiana's ass this entire time because they've racked up wins. Now, if Bama played SMU, Bama is what, like a 9-point favorite, 10-point favorite?
Yeah, they probably beat the brakes off SMU on a good day. I'm not gonna say it's like definitive because we've seen what Bama's done this year, but theoretically, yes, Bama would beat SMU pretty easily.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't have had a problem if Bama got in over SMU because ultimately, like, yeah, it's a better team. Okay, like, and it has name brand, and everyone's gonna make more money. Everyone's gonna be more interested. I think it's polarizing, so I think it creates a buzz. With that being said, like, they what Nick Saban was bringing up, which was that exactly what you said. Okay, well, now we're not going to schedule tough opponents. And everyone's like, oh, okay, well, this year you guys played like Wofford and all this bullshit. Okay. That doesn't set like what he says is dangerous because if he's saying it, it's being said around the nation, right? And they're like, oh, okay, well, now imagine a team that doesn't have an SEC conference schedule going out and playing all these bullshit games. And I'll tell you right now, like they already did. Indiana did, and they made the playoff because of it. SMU did, and they're making the playoff. You're like, all these teams are gonna just schedule a cupcake, and yeah, oh, well, beat your conference then. Okay, well, they are like in shittier conferences, it is going to be a problem. And so I think they need to make the criteria like bigger wins equal more. And instead, they've set the criteria of, okay, a bad loss is going to hurt you way more than a huge win is going to. Like, if they set that criteria early on this season, I think we see South Carolina in this realistically because they had really big wins and they really came on at the end of the season. I think winning should outweigh the losses that you have.
And I think too, like at the end there, the committee would have loved to be like Bama and South Carolina, you're in.
Yeah.
Like just push them in because they're in the SEC. They're more exciting. They're on a roll. Like, yeah, I would have loved to see South Carolina in there, and I kind of would like to see Bama, but I'm like a fan of the smaller schools. I'm a fan of like the lesser brands and getting parity in there, but I don't know how they fix what's about to happen in college football with the scheduling. Like, do you maybe put some kind of thing where like your strength of schedule needs to be this to be like to set your schedule? We need to agree on like your schedule needs to have this amount of wins from last year for us to be cool with it. Or like, I don't know what the process is of them like saying, okay, an ACC school, just schedule your games. Like, and then the Boston College over there is like, all right, we'll play all these shitty teams, and now we're at the top again. And then now that we're at the top, our recruiting's gonna be better, and we're gonna stay at the top, and blah blah blah. And we'll just never play anyone out of conference. And we'll keep losing in the first round. So
Yeah. Or
I
do
don't
this
know. I
like
don't know how
bullshit where
they
they
stop that.
play, oh, well, we played in SEC school and they schedule Mississippi State. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I don't know like how they can monitor or kind of regulate that in itself, because then there's also money changing hands of like these big colleges paying the like shitty teams to play them, and you don't want to take away too much of that because it's also helping the smaller schools.
And then realistically, again, just thinking of the domino effect of this, no one's going to want to schedule Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's going to get cupcake schedule and just walk into the playoff every year because what if I'm a power 4 school, I'm not scheduling Notre Dame. Why would I do that? Like, they're not even in a conference. I'm not fucking doing that.
Because I'll say too, like USC in hindsight, they would have never scheduled that game with them this season.
Yeah.
USC would have scheduled some easy team to beat at the end of the year right here.
Yeah, and so I think what Saban is saying is dangerous for college football. And I got into it with people this weekend that were just like, "Okay, well, Bama still lost to their conference, like to in conference," and I'm like, "I'm not talking about that, dumbass. I'm talking about what it means for college football moving forward." Oh, well, you shouldn't lose to Oklahoma. Fuck, I'm not fucking talking about that, dumbass. Like what? So
It's the fact that they won every out of conference game to keep them in the conversation of the playoff. That they're right there. It could have went either way that they went in or not. But it's the fact that you lose 3 conference games, let's say, you win out the rest, but you lost early, you win out at the end on your easy non-conference games, and that's going to get you in over someone who had to play like Texas or Georgia at the end.
yeah, and so I just think they are going to have to figure this out. I think ultimately what I heard someone make this argument like every year of the previous playoff, it was like, okay, well, we're leaving out a team that we think can be a national championship. And switching to this format, we're getting for sure at least the top 4 teams in the playoff. And we're going to like kind of play it out from there. If a bottom seed ends up winning it, cool. That's great for college football. But ultimately, we want to make sure that the top 4 contenders are in. I think then that's they've done their job, but I think there's holes in this format, and I think there's already thoughts being thrown out there that are bad for college football as a product.
Why don't they do a system where it's like the NFL, you have to play each team's division, like it rotates yearly? Because you could do, okay, the Big 12 this year you have to play SEC opponent and you have to play an ACC opponent on your schedule, like non-conference games, and then it just rotates, every year. That way I had to schedule non-conference, so from the list of these conferences I could schedule.
I think they should do this something like that, but what you run into is what about conference realignment? Like we're seeing a bowl game this year played between 2 Big 12 teams, but it's because Colorado has to fulfill their duty from the Pac 12 and BYU is representing the Big 12. But they're both Big 12 teams, but they had to fulfill that as a Pac 12 school. And so you like with conference realignment, that messes up things because let's say let's like the Pac 12, you got ravaged, you have no more teams. How could we fulfill this requirement now? And like the Mountain West is going to get ravished right now. Like we're seeing them going to have a mass exodus moving forward.
Mountain West added UC Davis, everything but football.
Hell yeah. Was Sacramento State trying to get in.
Hey, let them in. I'm all for Sacramento State. I'm a big Sacramento State guy right now.
Stingers up.
They have the money for a new stadium. They're going to have a professional baseball team in their minor league stadium, but still, they're going to have the Kings there still.
Come see Aaron Judge hit home runs against us.
Yo, they're filming blockbuster movies in Sacramento right now. So maybe not blockbuster. They're filming movies.
But yeah, I think that they're going to have to figure out the schedule or, as you said, do a cutoff. We can't do anything that's lower than whatever the fuck Indiana did, which was like 100 and something.
All right. Well, that's all we're going to have for college football right now. But we are going to talk more about this playoff situation in the next coming week. So make sure you subscribe, comment, like the video, share it around. We'll see you next time.
Later.